Greetings, Twitter. I thought I'd redo this because I had an uninvited guest in the earlier video, and I wanted to make a clean video this time around. Um, I wanted to take this opportunity to go live because I wanted to talk about something that occurred yesterday that was record-setting, I think, not only because of what was done, the amount of time it took. And that is with respect to the Homeland Security Committee meeting or hearing that took place. They voted to impeach Alejandr Majorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. And I had a chance to watch a good portion of the hearing because it ran very long. I mean, historic 15 hours in its entirety, 16 hours. So, excuse me. It ran long. I was able to watch a good portion of it, the ending of it, and it left me concerned. And I think it may have left a number of Americans concerned. And I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. It's sad to see really how politically divided our country is, or our legislative branch. I mean, if we didn't believe that it was divided before, I mean, the hearing itself last night or yesterday proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. It wasn't necessarily even the debate about whether he should be impeached. I mean, toward the end of the hearing, there was a lot of concessions that the Democrats wanted. I mean, knowing full well that the vote was going to go ahead, and that there was enough votes to impeach him or to approve the impeachment articles, and from there it wasn't really a matter to the Democrats whether they could stop the impeachment. As more, they were like, okay, we want to provide more information to the full House, to the Senate, to be able to understand how this decision was arrived at, and basically what precedents were considered, what precedents were disregarded. Basically, it was more of updating the articles to add more information, and even those concessions, those amendments were denied along party lines each and every time. The vote was on each proposed amendment or concession was 18 Republicans to 15 Democrats. It did not go one way or the other. Maybe once it went like 17-15 or something like that, because there was a no present vote, or a present vote instead of a yay or nay or whatever the case may be. So, I mean, to see that the conservatives did not want to deal with anything from the Democratic side was extremely saddening, because, I mean, you wonder why Congress doesn't pass laws, why these issues, and this is concrete proof right there that our government is so politically divided that it's no longer a matter of just division. It's more of political hate. And I don't think that's what the founders of our government really envisioned, was the extensive and extreme nature of the division that we're seeing today in our own federal government. Another concerning factor concerning item that I saw, and this stuck out with me throughout the course of the time that I was watching the hearings, was the fact that one specific subject was brought up numerous times, and the Republicans didn't budge on their viewpoint, or on their standing, I guess you could say, and that was the topic of prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutorial discretion basically is the flexibility that law enforcement has to long-standing doctrine used by law enforcement, actually, where they have the flexibility to say, okay, we can prosecute, arrest this person, or we can let them off with a warning. We can be lenient with them, basically, is what this is about. And this dates back to a lawsuit filed by Texas against the United States. I believe it was sometime last year or the year before, where they were suing Alejandr Majorkas that they were trying to force him to arrest each and every immigrant coming into the country. Now, the U.S. won the case because of the fact that the Supreme Court said, okay, the federal government has the ability to use prosecutorial discretion to determine who they detain, who they release, because the fact that the U.S. has shown ample proof that their detention facilities have reached capacity, and Majorkas, in order to, consistently detain people, he needs to use prosecutorial discretion to determine, okay, who am I going to release so that I can make room for those that I'm detaining? That's the essence of prosecutorial discretion. And the Supreme Court ruled and said, okay, they have the limited use of prosecutorial discretion in order to implement their immigration policies. This was actually written in an opinion by one of the conservative justices, Justice Kavanaugh. Well, by this committee impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, they're basically saying, prosecutorial discretion is not a tool to be used by the government. In other words, prosecutorial discretion is illegal. So this sets a very bad precedent in the sense that going forward, law enforcement may be restricted in the use of prosecutorial discretion simply because Congress has deemed that it is not an ample tool to be used in detention, in detaining or arresting an individual. That's what makes it all the more concerning, is the fact that they're making that, by doing this, they're making that statement, and at the same time, they are attempting to overturn what the Supreme Court has already established in a ruling. Does this congressional body have the authority to overturn what the ruling of interpretation by the U.S. Supreme Court? I don't think so. The feeling of the establishment of our founding fathers was that each branch was coherently equal to the other, and that they were to be checks and balances against each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that, okay, the legislative can overturn what the judicial has said. No. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a degree of equality and a system of checks and balances. And this is not, by any way, shape, or form, a check or balance against the judicial. So this is what makes it all the more concerning, is that the statement and the precedent, the possible precedent that this committee is making by impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas. I mean, this was a point that was repeatedly made over and over and over by the Democratic Party, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, think about this. And I use this as an example. I posted it earlier. Let's say you're on the highway, you get pulled over by a cop because maybe you were doing 5 miles over the limit, or maybe you had a broken tail light or something, and he pulls you over. The cop could use prosecutorial discretion and say, okay, I'm just going to give you a warning. You need to get this fixed, or you need to stay under the speed limit, or the next time you get pulled over, you're going to get a ticket. Well, without this prosecutorial discretion, that cop can't do that. All he can do is say, okay, here's a ticket, you were speeding, here's a ticket, you had a broken tail light. Now, let's say you go to court to plead your case on one of these items. The judge, if he had prosecutorial discretion, would say, okay, you have a receipt for the repair? You show him the receipt, and he's like, okay, charge dismissed. He's using his discretion and say, okay, I'm going to dismiss the charges because you made the effort to comply with, making the repair. Now, if it was a traffic violation, he can say, okay, well, this is your first time. you have the option to do defensive driving, or or if this is your first time and you weren't aware, I can dismiss the charges this time. These are acts of prosecutorial discretion, to be acts of leniency towards the individual. What this committee is saying is that, okay, the government cannot use prosecutorial discretion. That's what they're saying in essence. And I mean, it makes it concerning because, I mean, this could be used down the line as a precedent in any given situation to say, okay, the cops do not have that authority to act that way because we see that in the case of the impeachment of the Secretary of Homeland Security, he was not deemed to have that authority. Can you imagine the precedent that's being set by that? I mean, it is extremely concerning. One, as I said, for the matter, the statement I'm making about it, and two, they're basically rebelling against the Supreme Court. I mean, it makes the question. It makes to ask the question again: does this committee or does the legislative branch have the authority to overturn what the Supreme Court has ruled? I mean, basically, they're thumbing their nose at that ruling, saying, "Okay, well, the Supreme Court got it wrong. We disregard the Supreme Court." It makes it all that more concerning, and this is one of the reasons why I've always said since the beginning we need to look at our government through non-partisan, impartial eyes. We need to not use the political lenses that our elected officials are using, because we need to be able to hold them accountable for their actions. The fact that if we use that same political lens, let's say we use the conservative viewpoint or the conservative lens to evaluate our conservative elected officials, we're no better than they are, basically. Or if we use a democratic lens, political lens, to evaluate the Democrats, we're no better than they are in that sense, because we're not using an open mentality. We're not using moral or ethical or legal standards by which to hold our elected officials accountable, because we're going by a set of political standards, and that should not be the case. And making it more concerning now is that we're in an election year. 2024 is an election year, and I think as American citizens, we need to be able to have that impartial objectivity to be able to hold our elected officials accountable. I mean, for what they're doing. But we can't do that if we are politically blind ourselves. That's what I'm getting at. It has to be a neutral and nonpartisan approach. That's why many times I have said in the past, we need to take those political blinders off, because we cannot make a sound, moral, ethical, legal judgment if we are politically impaired. It is impossible to do that, and that's the bottom line. I mean, you can argue that 9 ways to Sunday, but if you are politically impaired, you cannot make a moral sound judgment. It's impossible, and it's harsh to say that, but that's the reality. That's the facts of the reality we live in today, and that's why I motivate my fellow Americans. You need to look at this outside the box, and the time to do it is now, because now we are in an election year, and we have the time. We have the momentum right now to make a difference in our government, to set the record straight, to hold our elected officials accountable in any way, shape, or form. That's the one thing that our political parties, especially the conservative, are trying to avoid, being held politically accountable. That's why the things are going this way: when you have a political party that is adamantly fighting or adamantly retaliating against the other for any reason whatsoever, you know something is not right. Whether it be the Democrats retaliating against the conservatives, whether it's the conservatives retaliating against the Democrats, the fact of the matter that there is any type of retaliation involved is concerning. That's not what our government was meant to do. The founding fathers never envisioned a retaliatory political government. That's why we need to hold our elected officials accountable for their actions, for the lives that were lost on account of the decisions that they made. There has to be a degree of accountability. And if we as Americans don't bring them into that accountability, we are no better than they are. That's the bottom line. That's the reality. And unfortunately, a vast percentage of our American community is so politically blinded that are politically impaired, they can't do that. That's why we need as Americans, those of us that are impartial, we need to hold our elected officials accountable. I mean, I can't say it more, and I cannot express it any more than that. There has to be a degree of accountability, and I think after what happened yesterday with this committee, I think it is time now that we have to hold our elected officials accountable. And in order to do that, we need to look at things outside the box. Otherwise, going forward, there may be a day where you can get, as I said, you can get pulled over, and the officer will not be lenient at all. Not because he doesn't want to be, he can't. And we'll owe this to our elected officials who have made the statement and set the precedent that prosecutorial discretion is no longer a legal, valid option. That's what I had for you today, and that's what I wanted to talk about. And I sincerely hope that this is something that as Americans, each and every American would think about what I've said. Out of anything or everything that I have said in the past, this is the most important thing that I will have ever said on my Twitter feed. And I hope that as Americans who watch this, spread the word. Please spread the word. Retweet. We have to make our American public aware now more than ever, because we're in an election year. And I think the objective here should be public awareness. Public awareness, because once we've made the public aware, it's up to them to decide. But we have to make them aware in order for them to make the decision. That's the bottom line in reality. And I think making this video, putting it out there, making people aware, that's the purpose. And hopefully, as Americans, we can finally hold our elected officials accountable and set the record straight. Thank you for your time. If anything else happens with the House vote later on down the line, I'll go live again. Or if anything happens down at the border, I'll go live and talk about it again. Thank you.